Well, let's get to our first topic of discussion today. Without a doubt, food inflation trend in Nigeria over the last 2 years has been overwhelming, as the proportion of majority income that is spent on food has remained ridiculously high. According to the latest figures from the National Bureau of Statistics, the composite food index rose 20.60% in June 2022. And that's on a year-on-year basis, leading to a rate of changes in average price levels, which declined by 1.23% compared to 21.83% it recorded in June 2021. The persistent rise in inflation results in a decline in the buying power of Nigerians, who are therefore getting poorer, as markets have expressed dismay over soaring prices of food items. Let's discuss this more. I'm being joined live from the United Kingdom. He is a researcher and agribusiness economist, Dr. Matthew Ojo. Dr. Ojo, good afternoon, and thank you so much for your time.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
Before we go to the crux of the matter, which is food inflation, how much of a worry is this? The World Bank, the WTO, IMF, and of course, Food and Agriculture Organization have come up to say that there is a lot to be done to avert food crisis. This is sounding scary. Were you expecting them to all come together to speak with one voice with regards to food security globally now?
Thank you, Tolu. That call couldn't have come at a better time because, as you just mentioned in your report, the global food prices for food, global prices for food is actually increasing and is becoming very worrisome. Now, if you look at the FAO food price index for June, it averaged 154.2. If you compare that to what it was in the month of May, it will seem as if it improved because it came down by 3.7%. But if you compare that same figure with what we had in June 2021, it actually rose by 23.1%. So you are saying that between last year and now, okay, global food prices has increased to close to a quarter of a percent of 100. So it then means that something that, for example, globally was selling for $1, as at that time last year, have 25 cent increase on that dollar itself. So what we are saying is that there's a concern, and like you mentioned, it is because we had a pandemic, all right, and we're just starting out of pandemic that disrupted global food supply all over the world, and just about when we're recovering, then the war in Ukraine started. And these two countries play major roles in terms of food and energy supply. So fuel is affected, also food is affected. And when you have those two, you begin to see the effect reverberating in other countries. Now, when FAO is computing their global food price index, it's usually done looking at 5 groups of food commodities. So you have fuels, you have vegetable oils, you have dairy, you have meat, and also you have sugar. Now, if you look at between last year and now, the global food price for wheat, for example, went up by over 26%. All right. The same thing for dairy, about 25%, actually 24.9% increase. So it calls for concern. It actually calls for it. And if there's hardly any country that is exempted, because even here in UK, the food prices in May was at a 13-year high, starting around 8.7% or 8.6%. So every country is feeling the pinch. But then, the interesting thing is, even though every country is feeling the pinch, the difference between those countries and Nigeria will come to this point I want to discuss with the proportion of household income spent on food. That many of these countries, the proportion of household income that is spent on food is below 10%. For example, the World Economic Forum reports in 2016 that the proportion of household income spent on food for US was around 6.4. All right. For UK, it was around 8.2. For Canada, 9.1. That was at 2016. So if you now bring Nigeria and slot us into that position, for Nigeria as at 2016, household income spent, the proportion rather spent on food stood at around 56.4%, more than half. So if it was more than half in 2016, and you have food inflation soaring up to this point where we have 20.6, you cannot begin to imagine the impact, effect of this global increase in food prices, the effect it will have on average Nigerian. So it calls for concern and it calls for worry, and it's not surprising at all that the WTO and all these world bodies are coming together to say something urgently has to be done. Because when you talk about food security, you first look at availability. Is it available? If it's available, you want to ask yourself, is it accessible? If it's accessible, you want to ask yourself, is it affordable? Okay, before you start talking about food quality and nutrition and all that. So it's not a surprise. The world is going through a turbulent time, but the challenge is that for us in Nigeria, it's just like a house that is already burning and somebody comes and pours petrol on it. It just increases the whole thing. So that's where it becomes disturbing for a country like ours.
Let's take it up from there. These export restrictions that we see is also affecting, and looking at the figures, about 8% of global food trade. Everyone is trying to manage what they have. And one way or the other, the CBN comes up to say a lot has been done with regards to rice, maize, I think something around wheat at the moment. How much of support do you think this can help as a country, all of these interventions? Well, I know we've talked about this before now, but at the moment, we need to know where we stand because it's getting serious.
Well, I don't know how much of rice we export. That will be. Let me just say this: those countries that are practicing food protectionism, if you like, are countries that play big in export. Okay, in those foods, in cereals and all that. I think the last time we discussed, I was on your show, I was talking about what India did. But in some of these products I've just mentioned, we don't play big in them. So the issue we need to start looking at or tackle is how do we ensure that we preserve even the current level of production that we have for those food commodities in Nigeria. Now, we have so many things contributing to increase in food prices in Nigeria. Example is you want the insecurity, because if you can't produce, the food won't be available. Now, even if the food is available and insecurity is not making it accessible, it then becomes a problem, because by the time it struggles to get to the market, affordability is an issue. So insecurity is an issue. Excuse me. Then we also have the cost of fuel. Okay, is it petrol or diesel, which somehow directly impacts on transportation? We also have electricity cost, the instability and the cost of it. Some of these things all go to fuel what we are seeing. So talking about what we can do as a nation is to see how we can ensure that current levels of production does not go lower than what it is now. Unfortunately, many farmers can still access their farms till date as we speak. So if you have insecurity affecting production, it will affect supply, and then invariably it will affect prices. So when if you now look at household, because there's only so much the government can do, even if they do bring in programs, it takes time for you to start seeing the effect or the consequences of such programs. Household income is constant, is not increasing at the same rate where you have prices increasing. So household might start to consider how they need to look at how to reprioritize. If you have a household budget, you need to look at it. What are the important things to consider purchasing? But unfortunately, most of the income of household goes into food, and they don't have money to do so many other things. And that is part of why crime is increasing in the country. That is part of the reasons we are having insecurity, part of the reasons we are having kidnapping, part of the reasons we are having corruption. Even vote buying is still thriving till date, because people need to feed, and that area needs to be addressed urgently.
Talking about expanding capacity, or a country where we know that we have issues around processing, we have issues around warehousing, that's storage, we have issues around wastage, for example, tomatoes and all of that. We can even see the picture on air before it moves from the north to the south to the west. We know what's been happening. Many say, can the rail come to rescue to address this transportation issue? And what more can be done to address challenges we face around wastage, around storage, around processing at this time where we should try to manage what we have?
Yeah, I think you just said it right, Tolu. But part of the things we need to focus on, I mentioned, is how do we preserve what we currently have. You know, studies have shown that over 30%, in some instances 40% of what we produce, you know, gets wasted before they eventually get to the table where they are consumed. So if we want to work around that, is to see how we can develop or leverage on already developed technologies for processing. But another concern will now be, where will you get the power? Because most of these things we are talking about require power. You require electricity. That is still not stable in a country like ours, up to date. So maybe local technologies, but those ones can only go so far. So if we can ensure that little trainings can be, you know, done en masse for both the producers and also the transporters and the marketers to at least contribute to the share lives of the produce they are marketing, that can contribute to availability and making it available even when it's off season. That's one. Number two, you mentioned rail. Rail is a very important, you know, how do I put it, part of this whole discourse. All right, because many roads have become impassable, and then you also have many roads not being saved these days. So even when you have these commodities or food products in ready to be transported, you know, fear of being attacked prevents people to travel by road. Maybe rail. You know, I don't want to go to the issue of knowing that rails are now being the train is even being attacked. But then we cannot shy away from the importance that such a means of transportation, you know, can bring upon this whole entire discourse. So whatever we need to do has to be done or planned now. Unfortunately, this is a year preparatory to elections. And let me also tell you, this situation might become worsened because from experience working with farmers, when it is a year pre-election, many of the farmers just hands off farming in the real sense of it. Why? Because free money comes. They go for meetings and meetings and meetings rather than go to the farm. And from the meetings and meetings they attend, they get money. And once the money comes, they don't bother much farming or waiting for their produce. So that is also most likely going to contribute to this scarcity or this food increase, because if many of them get distracted by election concerns and don't pay attention to producing, then we'll see the effect, you know, down the line, maybe in the next year. All this goes to tell us that there's still more we can do. The willpower to do it is what I don't like. I don't know. What I don't like is once we see a small achievement somewhere, they come to the media, they blow it out of proportion and start creating impression as if all is well and good. That sector needs address. If the world body is already complaining and calling for people or for measures to be taken, we, a country that spend or where households spend their income over, where they spend over half of their income on food, we also need to do something. Food security is in effect national security.
I totally agree with you, because a hungry man, of course, is an angry man, like it's always said. And that, well, let's wrap up with issues around grains. We've known before now that there was even a time that the federal government ordered that from the reserves, some grains should be made available for farmers. How well would that go? We know what's happening to the price of wheat and what's happening to flour and bread at the moment in Nigeria. I must tell you that it's not very easy. It's not. It used to be. It's a staple food that should be everywhere. But with the situation on ground, it's slightly on the high side. How do you see Nigerians moving on in the year 2022 as we move towards an election? Purchasing power remains low, and the price of food is really moving the high side. So what kind of life, what kind of balance? Can we strike a balance here?
the first thing is, in terms of grains, maybe grains being released from the national reserves, you want to have an idea of what is in the national reserves in the first place, vis-a-vis the population of the country. And then how often do we get these national reserves replenished? Because the major part of the country where these grains come from are battling insecurity. So we might end up depleting what we have in the reserve, and what we need to refill it might not even be there in the first place. So to me, that looks more like a palliative. Now, have we increased the national grain reserves in the country that, like us, in the past 20 years, in the past 10 years, in the past 5 years, knowing fully well that the rate of population increase has been galloping? Have we? If we have not, then we might just have an idea that we have this huge grain reserve somewhere, which might not even be able to feed more than 2-3 states, if in the real sense of it. So that that planning, I'm not sure I don't have real data on that, but I'm sure that not much is going on in that space, and we need to do more, even if there's something going on presently. Now, in the sense of what we can do as Nigerians, nature has given man the opportunity to adapt. If the people can't eat rice, they will go for a close substitute to it. All right. If people can't buy bread because the price is high, now families will go for a close substitute. Unfortunately, it might come to that, which is not what one is praying for. But if I can't afford bread, all right, I just have to look for what to substitute for bread, because I need to eat. Okay. Unfortunately, that is what might come down to. We don't pray it gets to that, but our prayer is that, and our call for the government is that, let this cry of elections not overshadow the need to do something in addressing the food insecurity that is currently besieging or challenging Nigeria. Many countries are going through it, I know, but we've explained how this affects us more, because from the list of countries, we spend so much on food. I don't want to just take it directly, because I know there are some other things that are expensive outside Nigeria that might be cheaper in Nigeria. I don't want to lose sight of that. But we're talking about food here, and food is an important thing. Man doesn't have to live by bread alone, but man actually cannot live without bread. So we need to address the issue of food insecurity, especially prices that are soaring, over and over. If the rate of change, I know according to NBS, I think is around average rate change, price change around 1.23%. So whatever needs to be done has to be done urgently. If World Bank, WTO is calling all nations to do something, Nigeria is part of the global community. It means we need to do more.
I must thank you so much. I've been speaking to Dr. Matthew Ojo, who joined from the United Kingdom. He's a researcher and agribusiness economist. Do enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Tolu.